Marcus Thompson had been working security at Ravenshollow Palace for nearly 15 years, but he had never encountered anything quite like this. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the East Wing as he made his routine rounds, checking the various chambers and corridors that housed the royal family's private quarters. His footsteps echoed softly on the polished marble floors as he approached the nursery of Prince Alexander, the youngest member of the fictional kingdom of Eldoria's royal family. The 3-year-old prince was known throughout the palace for his curious nature and endless energy. Staff members often found themselves chasing after the little boy as he explored every nook and cranny of his expansive home. His nursery was a wonderland of toys, books, and games, carefully curated by the royal staff to provide both entertainment and education for the young prince. Marcus pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside the nursery. Everything appeared normal at first glance. The morning light illuminated the colorful murals painted on the walls, depicting scenes from classic fairy tales and adventures. Stuffed animals sat arranged on shelves, and a magnificent wooden toy chest dominated one corner of the room. The chest was an antique piece, passed down through generations of the royal family, carved with intricate designs of dragons and castles. As Marcus conducted his standard security sweep, something caught his attention. A tiny glint of light reflected from within the toy chest, barely visible unless one looked from just the right angle. His training kicked in immediately. After years of protecting the royal family, he had developed an acute awareness of anything that seemed out of place or unusual. He approached the toy chest cautiously, his hand instinctively moving to the radio clip to his belt. The chest was partially open, revealing an assortment of wooden blocks, toy soldiers, and stuffed creatures inside. But there, nestled between a teddy bear and a set of building blocks, was something that definitely did not belong in a child's toy collection. Marcus leaned closer, his heart rate increasing as he recognized what he was looking at. It was a small surveillance camera, no larger than a button, with a tiny lens that had been carefully positioned to have a clear view of the entire nursery. The device was sophisticated, clearly professional-grade equipment rather than some simple recording device. His mind raced through the implications of this discovery. Who had placed this camera in the prince's nursery? How long had it been there? Most importantly, who had been watching the young prince, and why? The security protocols at Ravenshollow Palace were extensive, with multiple layers of protection surrounding the royal family. For someone to have gained access to the nursery and planted surveillance equipment suggested either an inside job or a security breach of unprecedented scale. Marcus immediately stepped away from the toy chest and reached for his radio. "Control, this is Thompson. I need immediate backup in the East Wing nursery. We have a Code 7 situation." Code 7 was the palace's designation for potential surveillance or espionage threats against the royal family. Within minutes, the nursery was swarming with additional security personnel. Captain Sarah Mitchell, the head of palace security, arrived shortly after, her expression grave as Marcus briefed her on his discovery. She examined the camera carefully without disturbing its position, taking photographs from multiple angles while other team members began a comprehensive sweep of the entire room. "How did our sweeps miss this?" Captain Mitchell asked, her voice tight with concern. The palace conducted regular electronic surveillance sweeps to detect any unauthorized recording devices, but somehow this camera had evaded detection. Marcus shook his head grimly. "It's well hidden, and the technology looks advanced. Someone knew exactly what they were doing when they placed it here. This wasn't some amateur operation." As the security team worked methodically through the nursery, checking every toy, every book, and every piece of furniture, they made several more disturbing discoveries. There were additional cameras hidden throughout the room, each one positioned to capture different angles and ensure complete coverage of the space. The sophistication of the surveillance network suggested that whoever was behind this had significant resources and expertise. The investigation revealed that the cameras were not just simple recording devices. They appeared to be transmitting live feeds to an external location, meaning that someone had been watching Prince Alexander in real time, possibly for weeks or even months. The realization sent chills through the entire security team. Captain Mitchell immediately ordered a complete lockdown of the East Wing while forensic specialists were brought in to analyze the equipment. The prince and his nanny were relocated to secure quarters in another part of the palace, while investigators began the painstaking process of tracing the origin of the surveillance devices. The discovery raised troubling questions about the security of the entire royal family. If the prince's nursery had been compromised, what other areas of the palace might be under surveillance? The team began planning an immediate and comprehensive security audit of every room, every corridor, and every space within the palace grounds. As Marcus stood guard outside the nursery while the investigation continued inside, he couldn't help but think about the innocence that had been violated. Prince Alexander was just a child, playing with his toys and exploring his world, unaware that his every move had been monitored by unknown eyes. The thought filled Marcus with both anger and determination to find those responsible. The investigation was just beginning, but already it was clear that this was no ordinary security breach. The level of planning and execution suggested a sophisticated operation with potentially serious implications for the safety and privacy of the royal family. As the hours passed and more evidence was uncovered, it became increasingly apparent that the palace was dealing with a threat unlike any they had faced before. The nursery, once a place of joy and innocence, had become the center of a mystery that would shake the very foundations of palace security and force everyone to question who could be trusted in the inner circles of the royal household. The forensic analysis of the surveillance equipment revealed details that made Captain Mitchell's worst fears seem justified. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the palace's chief technology expert, worked through the night examining the cameras and their associated equipment. Her findings painted a picture of an operation far more sophisticated than anyone had initially imagined. These devices are military-grade, Dr. Vasquez explained as she presented her preliminary report to the Emergency Security Council that had been hastily assembled in the palace's secure conference room. The cameras use advanced encryption and satellite uplink technology. Whoever installed these had access to equipment that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and requires specialized knowledge to operate. King Frederick and Queen Isabella sat at the head of the long mahogany table, their faces etched with worry and anger. The violation of their son's privacy and safety had shaken them to their core. Around the table sat the kingdom's top security officials, intelligence advisors, and trusted palace staff members who had been cleared for this sensitive discussion. "Do we know how long they've been active?" the king asked, his voice carefully controlled despite the obvious strain he was under. Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. "Based on the battery levels and data storage patterns, I estimate they've been operational for at least 3 months, possibly longer." The cameras were programmed to activate only during specific hours, primarily when Prince Alexander was in the nursery playing or during his afternoon nap times. The Queen's hand moved instinctively to her throat, a gesture that betrayed her deep distress. 3 months, she whispered. "Someone has been watching our child for 3 months, and we had no idea." Director James Hawthorne from the Royal Intelligence Service leaned forward, his expression serious. "Your Majesties, we need to consider the possibility that this surveillance was part of a larger operation. The level of sophistication suggests state-level involvement or a very well-funded criminal organization." Marcus Thompson, who had been invited to attend the meeting due to his role in discovering the cameras, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He still couldn't shake the feeling that he should have detected the surveillance equipment sooner, despite everyone assuring him that the devices were virtually undetectable using standard security sweeps. Captain Mitchell addressed the room's concerns about internal security. "We've begun interviewing every staff member who had access to the nursery over the past 6 months. So far, everyone has cooperated fully, but we're conducting thorough background checks on all personnel, including longtime employees." The process of investigating the palace staff was particularly painful for everyone involved. Many of the employees had worked at Ravenshollow Palace for decades, becoming almost like extended family to the royals. The idea that one of them might be involved in the surveillance operation was heartbreaking to consider. "What about the transmission signals?" asked Lord Chancellor Thomas Pemberton, the King's senior advisor. "Can we trace where the video feeds were being sent?" Dr. Vasquez pulled up a technical diagram on her tablet. The cameras were transmitting to a relay station approximately 20 kilometers from the palace. "We've identified the location, and intelligence teams are preparing to investigate, but we expect it's likely just another link in the chain rather than the final destination." The investigation expanded rapidly as more resources were devoted to uncovering the scope of the surveillance operation. Technical specialists swept every room in the palace, using advanced detection equipment that could identify even the most sophisticated hidden cameras and listening devices. The process was exhaustive and time-consuming, but necessary to ensure the safety and privacy of the royal family. As the sweep continued, investigators made additional disturbing discoveries. Hidden cameras were found in the library where Prince Alexander often had his reading lessons, in the garden pavilion where he played with his tutor, and even in some of the corridors he frequently used to move between different parts of the palace. The pattern suggested that whoever was behind the operation had detailed knowledge of the prince's daily routine and favorite locations. The psychological impact on the royal family was significant. Queen Isabella found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering if unseen eyes were still watching her family despite the ongoing security upgrades. The king struggled to maintain his composure during public appearances while privately grappling with feelings of vulnerability and violation. Prince Alexander, thankfully, was too young to fully understand what was happening. His parents and the palace staff worked hard to maintain his normal routine while keeping him in secure areas that had been thoroughly swept and secured. His innocent questions about why he couldn't play in his usual nursery were met with gentle explanations about repairs being done to make his room even better. The investigation team discovered that the cameras had sophisticated motion detection capabilities and were programmed to focus on Prince Alexander specifically. When he entered a monitored room, the cameras would automatically adjust their positioning to track his movements. This level of technological sophistication reinforced the theory that the operation was backed by significant resources and expertise. As interviews with palace staff continued, a troubling pattern began to emerge. Several employees reported noticing small inconsistencies over the past few months that they had dismissed at the time but now seemed potentially significant. Tools left in slightly different positions, security panels that had been accessed outside of normal maintenance schedules, and delivery personnel who seemed unusually interested in the palace layout. The investigation also revealed that the surveillance operation had likely required inside knowledge to execute successfully. The cameras were placed in locations that would be difficult for an outsider to access without triggering security alarms. This meant that either someone with legitimate access to those areas was involved, or the intruders had somehow compromised the palace's security systems. Director Hawthorne coordinated with international intelligence agencies to determine if similar surveillance operations had been detected at other royal residences or government facilities around the world. The responses were concerning, as several allies reported discovering sophisticated surveillance equipment in sensitive locations over the past year, suggesting a broader pattern of espionage activities. The stress of the investigation began to take its toll on everyone involved. The palace, usually a place of relative calm and routine, was now bustling with investigators, technicians, and security personnel conducting their exhaustive search for answers. The normal rhythms of royal life were disrupted as every aspect of palace operations came under scrutiny. Despite the challenges, the investigation team remained determined to uncover the truth behind the surveillance operation and ensure that those responsible were brought to justice. The violation of Prince Alexander's privacy and the potential threat to his safety had galvanized everyone involved in the investigation to work tirelessly until they found answers. As the second day of the investigation drew to a close, new leads were beginning to emerge that would take the case in unexpected directions. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, a palace cleaning supervisor who had worked at Ravenshollow for over 20 years, approached Captain Mitchell with information that would change the entire direction of the case. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat in the secure interview room, clearly struggling with the decision to come forward. "I should have said something sooner," Maria began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I wasn't sure if it meant anything, and I didn't want to cause trouble for someone who might be innocent." Captain Mitchell leaned forward encouragingly. "Whatever you can tell us will be helpful, Maria. No one will blame you for being cautious." Maria took a deep breath before continuing. "About 4 months ago, I noticed that someone had been in the nursery during the night shift. Nothing was damaged or moved obviously, but when you clean the same rooms for 20 years, you notice small changes. Dust patterns were different, and some of the toys were arranged slightly differently than how I had left them. This revelation was significant because the night shift had minimal staffing, and access to the royal family's private quarters was strictly limited during those hours. Maria's observations suggested that someone had been accessing the nursery when security coverage was lightest and when their presence was least likely to be detected.
Did you report these observations at the time? Captain Mitchell asked.
Maria shook her head apologetically. I mentioned it to my supervisor, but he said that Prince Alexander probably just played with his toys before bed and forgot to put them back exactly where they belonged. It seemed like a reasonable explanation, so I didn't pursue it further. The investigation team immediately pulled security footage from the night shifts over the past 4 months, focusing on the corridors leading to the nursery. The review was painstaking, as they had to examine hours of video from multiple camera angles to identify any suspicious activity during the overnight hours. Detective Inspector Rebecca Clark from the Royal Protection Unit led the video analysis effort. After days of careful examination, she discovered several instances where a figure could be seen moving through the corridors at night, always dressed in what appeared to be maintenance or cleaning attire. The person was careful to avoid direct camera angles, suggesting they were familiar with the security system's blind spots. The individual appears to be of medium height and build, Detective Clark reported to the investigation team. They move with confidence through the palace, suggesting familiarity with the layout. Most importantly, they have access credentials that allow them to enter restricted areas without triggering security alerts. This discovery narrowed the investigation significantly. Only a small number of people had the necessary access credentials to move freely through the palace during night hours. The list included senior security personnel, maintenance supervisors, and a select group of trusted household staff members. The investigation took a more serious turn when Dr. Vasquez completed her analysis of the data transmission patterns. She discovered that the surveillance cameras had been uploading information to servers located in 3 different countries, using a complex routing system designed to obscure the final destination of the data. This is definitely a professional espionage operation, Dr. Vasquez explained to the expanded investigation team. The data routing through multiple countries is a classic technique used by intelligence agencies to prevent tracking. We're dealing with people who have extensive training in surveillance and counter-surveillance techniques. King Frederick authorized the involvement of additional resources from the kingdom's intelligence services and requested assistance from allied nations' security agencies. The case had clearly escalated beyond a simple security breach and now appeared to be an international espionage matter with potential implications for national security. The investigation team developed a strategy to identify the person responsible for the nighttime nursery visits. They would use enhanced security measures and surveillance techniques to monitor the restricted areas during night shifts without alerting potential suspects to their increased scrutiny. Meanwhile, the forensic analysis of the surveillance cameras revealed another disturbing detail. The devices contained sophisticated facial recognition software programs specifically to identify Prince Alexander. When the young prince entered a monitored area, the cameras would automatically begin recording at higher resolution and transmit the footage with priority status. Someone was very interested in detailed information about Prince Alexander's daily activities, his interactions with staff members, and his behavioral patterns, Director Hawthorne explained to the king and queen during a private briefing. This level of specific targeting suggests the surveillance was either preliminary intelligence gathering for a future operation or part of a longer-term monitoring program. The psychological evaluation team brought in to assess the situation raised concerns about the potential motivations behind such extensive surveillance of a young child. Dr. Amanda Foster, a specialist in threat assessment, presented several possible scenarios ranging from kidnapping preparation to intelligence gathering for political purposes. The systematic nature of the surveillance and the focus on routine and behavioral patterns suggests that whoever is behind this operation was planning something that required detailed knowledge of Prince Alexander's habits and the palace's security procedures, Dr. Foster explained.
The investigation team decided to set a trap.
They would allow normal operations to resume in areas that had been cleared of surveillance equipment while secretly monitoring those spaces with their own advanced detection systems. If the perpetrator attempted to reinstall cameras or conduct further surveillance activities, they would be caught in the act. The plan required careful coordination between multiple security teams and absolute discretion from all palace staff members who were aware of the operation. Any leak of information about the trap could compromise the entire investigation and allow the responsible parties to escape justice. As preparations for the trap were finalized, investigators continued working to identify the person captured on security footage during the nighttime visits to the nursery. Enhanced image analysis and comparison with employee identification photos was yielding promising results, with several potential matches identified from the palace's personnel records. The investigation had evolved from a simple security breach discovery into a complex counterintelligence operation involving multiple agencies and significant resources. The stakes were high, as the safety of the royal family and potentially sensitive state information could be at risk depending on the true scope and objectives of the surveillance operation. Captain Mitchell coordinated with intelligence officials to ensure that all aspects of the investigation remained secure while pursuing every available lead. The violation of Prince Alexander's privacy had become a catalyst for uncovering what appeared to be a much larger and more sophisticated espionage network operating within the kingdom. The trap was set, and now the investigation team could only wait to see if their carefully planned operation would succeed in catching those responsible for violating the security and privacy of the royal family. The trap was sprung on a cold Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after Marcus Thompson's initial discovery of the surveillance cameras. The investigation team had positioned themselves strategically throughout the palace, with advanced monitoring equipment focused on the nursery and surrounding corridors. Everyone involved in the operation maintained radio silence while waiting for any sign of suspicious activity. At 2:47 a.m., motion sensors detected movement in the East Wing corridor leading to the nursery. Detective Inspector Clark, monitoring the enhanced surveillance feed from the command center, immediately alerted the response teams positioned throughout the building. The figure moving through the shadows matched the height and build of the person captured in earlier security footage. "Target is approaching the nursery," Clark whispered into her radio. All units maintain position until further orders. The individual moved with the same confidence and familiarity that had been observed in previous footage. They wore dark maintenance coveralls and carried what appeared to be a small equipment bag. Most significantly, they used a valid access card to enter the restricted area, confirming that this was indeed an inside operation. Captain Mitchell watched from her concealed position as the figure entered the nursery and began examining the areas where cameras had previously been discovered. The person spent several minutes checking the toy chest and other locations, apparently confirming that their surveillance equipment had been removed. "They're looking for their cameras," Mitchell reported quietly to the command center. "This confirms they're aware the devices have been discovered." The suspect then began placing new surveillance equipment in different locations throughout the nursery, working with practiced efficiency that suggested extensive training in covert operations. Each device was carefully positioned and tested before moving to the next location. The level of professionalism displayed was both impressive and deeply concerning. After 20 minutes of activity in the nursery, the figure prepared to leave. This was the moment the investigation team had been waiting for. As the suspect approached the corridor exit, security personnel moved into position to make the arrest. "This is Palace Security," Captain Mitchell announced as she and her team emerged from their concealed positions. "Stop where you are and place your hands where we can see them." The suspect froze momentarily before suddenly breaking into a run toward a service stairwell. The chase that followed revealed the individual's extensive knowledge of the palace layout, as they navigated through maintenance corridors and service areas that most staff members rarely used. Detective Inspector Clark coordinated the pursuit from the command center, directing teams to intercept the fleeing suspect at strategic locations throughout the building. The palace's security systems were activated to lock down specific areas and guide the pursuit toward controlled spaces where an arrest could be made safely. The chase ended when the suspect was cornered in the palace's basement mechanical room. Faced with armed security personnel and no viable escape route, they finally surrendered. As the lights were turned on and the suspect was secured, the investigation team received their first major shock of the evening. The person in custody was David Harrison, the palace's deputy maintenance supervisor, a trusted employee who had worked at Ravenshollow Palace for 12 years. Harrison had an exemplary service record and had been considered beyond suspicion by virtually everyone who knew him. His access to all areas of the palace and his knowledge of security procedures had made him the perfect inside agent for a surveillance operation. "Why?" Captain Mitchell asked as Harrison was placed in restraints. "Why would you do this to the royal family who trusted you?" Harrison remained silent, his expression revealing nothing about his motivations or who might have been directing his activities. The investigation team knew that getting him to talk would require careful interrogation techniques and, possibly, cooperation from intelligence professionals trained in handling espionage cases. The immediate priority was securing any additional surveillance equipment that Harrison might have placed throughout the palace. A comprehensive search revealed several new cameras that had been installed in various locations over the past week, confirming that the surveillance operation had been attempting to resume despite the initial discovery. Dr. Vasquez analyzed the new equipment and found that it was even more sophisticated than the original devices. These cameras have artificial intelligence capabilities, she explained to the investigation team. They can automatically identify and track specific individuals while ignoring others. Someone has invested significant resources in upgrading their surveillance capabilities. The arrest of Harrison opened new avenues for the investigation, but it also raised additional questions. Was he acting alone, or was he part of a larger network? Who was providing him with the advanced surveillance equipment? Most importantly, what was the ultimate objective of the surveillance operation targeting Prince Alexander? Director Hawthorne took charge of Harrison's interrogation, bringing in specialists trained in counterintelligence questioning techniques. The process would be delicate, as they needed to extract information without compromising ongoing security operations or revealing the full extent of their knowledge about the surveillance network. Initial questioning revealed that Harrison had been recruited approximately 8 months earlier by individuals who claimed to represent a foreign intelligence service. They had offered him substantial financial compensation in exchange for providing access to the palace and installing surveillance equipment in specific locations. They told me it was just intelligence gathering, Harrison claimed during one interrogation session. They said they only wanted to understand the royal family's daily routines for protective purposes. I never thought they would target a child. The investigation team was skeptical of Harrison's claimed ignorance about the true nature of his activities. The sophisticated equipment he had been installing and his careful targeting of Prince Alexander's locations suggested a level of involvement that went beyond simple access provision. Analysis of Harrison's financial records revealed several large cash deposits over the past 8 months, totaling more than $200,000. The money had been deposited in small amounts to avoid triggering banking surveillance systems, indicating that his handlers were experienced in covert financial operations. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered a secure communication device hidden in Harrison's home. Dr. Vasquez's analysis of the device revealed encrypted messages between Harrison and his foreign contacts, providing the first concrete evidence of the international nature of the surveillance operation. The messages are heavily encrypted, but we're making progress in decoding them, Dr. Vasquez reported. What we've been able to translate so far suggests that the surveillance of Prince Alexander was part of a larger intelligence-gathering operation targeting the royal family and, possibly, government officials. The scope of the investigation expanded once again as intelligence agencies worked to identify and track down Harrison's foreign contacts. The case had evolved from a simple security breach into an international espionage investigation with significant implications for national security and the safety of the royal family. King Frederick and Queen Isabella were briefed on the developments in Harrison's arrest and interrogation. While they felt some relief that the immediate threat had been identified and contained, they were deeply troubled by the realization that someone they had trusted for over a decade had been systematically violating their family's privacy and potentially putting their child at risk. The investigation was far from over, as authorities worked to uncover the full extent of the surveillance network and identify all individuals involved in the operation. The final phase of the investigation began with a breakthrough in the encrypted communications found on David Harrison's secure device. After weeks of intensive cryptographic analysis, Dr. Vasquez and her team of specialists finally cracked the encryption protocol, revealing the full scope of the international espionage operation that had infiltrated Ravenshollow Palace. The decoded messages painted a disturbing picture of a sophisticated intelligence network that had been targeting royal families and government officials across multiple countries. Prince Alexander's surveillance was just one component of a larger operation designed to gather intelligence that could be used for political manipulation, economic espionage, or potentially more sinister purposes. The operation was coordinated by a private intelligence firm based in Eastern Europe, Director Hawthorne explained to the Emergency Security Council. They were contracted by an unnamed client to gather detailed intelligence on the royal family's daily routines, security procedures, and personal relationships. The focus on Prince Alexander appears to have been part of a long-term strategy to identify potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited in the future. The revelation that a private intelligence firm was behind the operation rather than a foreign government agency added new complexity to the case. Private intelligence companies operated in legal gray areas and could be hired by various clients including corporations, criminal organizations, or rogue government elements seeking plausible deniability for their activities. Harrison's continued interrogation revealed that he had been contacted by the intelligence firm through seemingly legitimate channels. They had approached him with an offer to conduct security assessments of the palace, claiming to be working on behalf of an international security consulting company hired to evaluate protective measures for royal families worldwide. They were very professional and convincing, Harrison admitted during one session. They provided documentation that appeared legitimate and even references from other security firms. I thought I was helping to improve the palace's security, not compromising it. The investigation team discovered that the intelligence firm had used similar recruitment tactics at other locations, identifying trusted employees with access to sensitive areas and convincing them to participate in what they believed were legitimate security assessments. This approach allowed them to avoid suspicion while gaining access to highly classified information and locations. Further analysis of the surveillance footage and equipment revealed the true sophistication of the operation. The cameras installed throughout the palace were part of an integrated network capable of tracking individuals throughout the building, recording conversations, and even analyzing behavioral patterns to predict future activities.
The level of artificial intelligence integration in their surveillance system is remarkable, Dr. Vasquez reported.
They could automatically identify when Prince Alexander was alone versus when he was with staff members, and they prioritized recording sessions when he was engaged in educational activities or interacting with his tutors. The investigation expanded internationally as law enforcement agencies in multiple countries coordinated efforts to identify and apprehend members of the intelligence network. The operation had tentacles reaching across Europe and beyond, with surveillance activities detected at government facilities, diplomatic missions, and other royal residences. King Frederick authorized unprecedented cooperation with international law enforcement agencies, sharing intelligence and resources to ensure that the full network was dismantled. The violation of his family's privacy had become a catalyst for exposing a much larger threat to democratic institutions and individual privacy rights. The psychological impact on the royal family continued to be significant. Queen Isabella worked with counselors to process the violation of their family's privacy and develop strategies for helping Prince Alexander maintain a sense of security and normalcy despite the events that had occurred around him. The hardest part is knowing that someone was watching our son during his most innocent moments, the Queen confided to Captain Mitchell during one of their security briefings. Playing with his toys, reading his bedtime stories, learning to walk properly, all of these precious developmental moments were being recorded and analyzed by strangers with unknown intentions. The security overhaul at Ravenshollow Palace was comprehensive, involving the installation of new detection systems, revised access protocols, and enhanced background screening procedures for all staff members. The goal was to prevent future infiltration while maintaining the relatively open and family-friendly atmosphere that the royal family valued. Marcus Thompson, whose vigilance had uncovered the initial surveillance cameras, was commended for his professionalism and attention to detail. His discovery had not only protected Prince Alexander but had also exposed an international espionage network that posed threats far beyond the palace walls. Without Marcus's sharp eyes and willingness to investigate something that seemed slightly out of place, this operation might have continued for months or years, Captain Mitchell noted in her final report on the incident. The legal proceedings against Harrison and the International Intelligence Network were complex, involving multiple jurisdictions and extensive coordination between law enforcement agencies. Harrison ultimately cooperated fully with investigators, providing detailed information about his contacts and activities in exchange for a reduced sentence. The private intelligence firm's leadership was eventually arrested in a coordinated international operation involving law enforcement agencies from 6 countries. Their facilities were raided, and extensive evidence was recovered showing the scope of their surveillance activities targeting government officials, business leaders, and royal families worldwide. The case became a landmark example of how modern threats to privacy and security could originate from unexpected sources and require innovative investigative approaches to uncover and address. The techniques used to identify and apprehend the surveillance network became a model for other security agencies dealing with similar threats. Prince Alexander, now older and more aware of his surroundings, occasionally asked questions about why his nursery had been repaired for so long and why there were so many new security procedures at the palace. His parents and staff members worked carefully to provide age-appropriate explanations that would help him understand the importance of security without creating anxiety or fear. The investigation's conclusion brought a sense of closure to the royal family and palace staff, but it also served as a reminder of the constant vigilance required to protect privacy and security in an increasingly connected world. The nursery secret had been exposed, the threats neutralized, and the perpetrators brought to justice, but the lessons learned would continue to influence security practices for years to come. The case demonstrated that even the most trusted individuals could be compromised by sophisticated adversaries, and that effective security required not just technology and procedures, but also the human element of awareness, dedication, and courage exemplified by Marcus Thompson and the entire investigation team who had worked tirelessly to protect the royal family and uncover the truth behind the nursery secret.